I'm Zoe, 29 years old, and 2 weeks ago, I sat in a hospital administrator's office, watching my father sign documents that proved he'd been stealing my inheritance for 7 years. Not to help himself. Not because he was desperate, but to fund my brother's failed business ventures while I worked double shifts as an ER nurse just to keep my own lights on. And when I confronted him, he looked me in the eyes and said, "Family means sacrifice." The administrator asked him one question that made everything unravel. But before I tell you what that question was, take a moment to like and subscribe if stories about family betrayal and finding your strength resonate with you. Drop a comment too. Where are you watching from? What time is it there? Now, let me take you back 3 weeks to the phone call that shattered everything I thought I knew about the people who raised me. I've always been the responsible one. It's why I became a nurse, why I budget every paycheck down to the dollar. Why at 29 I had $43,000 saved in what I thought was an untouchable trust fund my grandmother left me when she died 5 years ago. Grandma Ellen was the only person in my family who ever really saw me. While everyone else orbited around my older brother Connor, she'd pull me aside at family dinners. "Zoe," she'd whisper, squeezing my hand, "you're going to do something extraordinary. Don't let anyone dim that light." She died of a stroke at 71, sudden and devastating. At her funeral, my father pulled me aside. "Your grandmother left you something. A trust fund. $50,000. But you can't access it until you're 30, or in case of emergency medical expenses." That's what she wanted. I nodded through my tears. That sounded like Grandma Ellen, always planning ahead. Always protecting me. I didn't question it. Why would I? He was my father. Connor, my brother, is 3 years older and has been chasing the entrepreneurial dream since college. App ideas, cryptocurrency schemes, a food truck that lasted 6 weeks. Each venture more disastrous than the last. And each time, Mom and Dad were there with encouragement, with loans they never asked to be repaid, with connections and second chances. Meanwhile, I paid my own way through nursing school. Student loans, night shifts at a diner, clinical rotations that left me sleeping 4 hours a night. When I graduated, I had $64,000 in debt and no help from anyone. "You're doing so well on your own," Dad would say, like it was a compliment instead of an excuse. Connor lived in their basement rent-free until he was 28. I moved out at 19 and never asked for a dollar. But I'm getting ahead of myself. 3 weeks ago, I still believed that family meant something. That the people who raised you wouldn't steal from you. I was about to learn how wrong I was. It started with a letter. Plain white envelope, return address from Sterling and Associates Estate Management. I opened it standing in my apartment kitchen after a 14-hour shift, still in my scrubs, feet aching. "Dear Miss Zoe Reeves, as the designated beneficiary of the Ellen May Reeves Memorial Trust, we are required to provide you with an annual statement of account activity." My hands went numb. Annual statement? I'd never received one before. I kept reading. Current balance as of March 1st, 2025, $4,247.89. Please see attached documentation for withdrawal history. $4,000. The trust had started at $50,000. Where did $46,000 go? The attached pages showed everything. 7 years of withdrawals. Small ones at first, $2,000 here, $3,500 there. Then larger, $8,000, $12,000. The most recent withdrawal, just 2 months ago, $9,200. Every single withdrawal was authorized by Richard Reeves, my father, co-trustee of my grandmother's trust. Every withdrawal was marked, beneficiary medical expenses. I hadn't had any medical expenses. My job provided insurance. The biggest medical bill I'd had in 7 years was $200 for an urgent care visit when I had strep throat. I sat down on my kitchen floor because my legs wouldn't hold me anymore. I called the estate management company the next morning. The representative was polite but firm. "Miss Reeves, your father is listed as co-trustee with full withdrawal authorization for medical expenses related to you until you turn 30. We've processed every request he submitted." What documentation did he provide? Copies of medical bills in your name. Hospital statements, prescription receipts, therapy invoices. "Can you send me copies?" "Of course. They'll be in your email within the hour." I waited in my car in the hospital parking lot before my shift started. When the email arrived, I opened it with shaking hands. There they were. Medical bills. All in my name. all from facilities I'd never been to. Physical therapy for a car accident I never had. Prescription bills for medications I'd never taken. A 3-day hospital stay at a facility 200 miles away on a weekend I'd worked a double shift. Every single document was forged. I didn't call first. I drove straight to my parents' house after my shift ended at 11 p.m. The porch light was on. Connor's car was in the driveway. Of course it was. I used my key. The one Mom insisted I keep in case of emergency. This was an emergency. They were all in the living room. Mom watching TV, Dad reading a book, Connor on his laptop at the dining table. Zoe. Mom looked up, surprised. What are you doing here so late? I didn't sit down. Didn't take off my coat. Just stood there with 7 years of bank statements in my hand and asked the question that had been burning in my chest for 24 hours. Dad, did you steal my inheritance? The room went silent. The TV kept playing. Some cooking show. The sound of sizzling in a pan. Dad set down his book slowly. Excuse me. Grandma Ellen's trust. $46,000 withdrawn over 7 years. All marked as my medical expenses. All forged. Mom stood up. Zoe, what are you talking about? I'm talking about the trust fund Grandma left me. The one I couldn't access until I turned 30. Except Dad's been accessing it. For 7 years. Connor looked up from his laptop, but he didn't look surprised. He looked guilty. Dad's face went through 3 expressions in 2 seconds. Shock. Recognition. Then something harder. Defensive. Those were legitimate medical expenses. I've never been to Preston Memorial Hospital. I've never had physical therapy. I've never taken adalimumab for rheumatoid arthritis because I don't have rheumatoid arthritis. You're mistaken. I have the documents right here. All forged. All in my name. All signed by you. Silence. Connor closed his laptop. Mom sat back down slowly, her hand over her mouth. Where did the money go? My voice was steady. Calmer than I felt. More silence. Where did it go? Connor finally spoke. Zoe, I can explain. And just like that, I knew. You. I turned to Connor, and something inside me that had been carefully controlled for 29 years started to crack. It was for you. He stood up from the dining table, hands raised like I was a wild animal he needed to calm. Zoe, listen. How much? It's not that simple. How much? All of it. Dad's voice cut through the room. Quiet. Flat. Like he was admitting he'd forgotten to buy milk. I stared at him. This man who'd raised me, who'd taught me to ride a bike, who'd walked me to my first day of kindergarten holding my hand. All of it, I repeated. Connor needed capital for his businesses. Startup costs. Inventory. Marketing. It was an investment in his future. It was my money. Grandma left it to me. Mom finally spoke, her voice shaking. Zoe, you have to understand. Connor was struggling. He needed help. You were doing fine on your own. You always do fine. There it was. The same excuse they'd used my entire life. I was doing fine because I had no choice. Because no one ever offered to help me. You never asked, Dad said. I shouldn't have to ask for my own inheritance. The neighbors probably heard me. I didn't care. Connor stepped forward. Zoe, I was going to pay it back. Every business I started, I thought this would be the one. I thought I'd be able to replace the money before you even knew. Before I knew you stole from me. Borrowed, Dad corrected. Not stolen. Family doesn't steal from family. I laughed. Actually laughed. A harsh, broken sound that didn't feel like it came from me. You forged medical documents. You lied to an estate management company. You took money that wasn't yours for 7 years. I looked at each of them. That's not borrowing. That's fraud. Mom stood up again, tears forming in her eyes. Zoe, please. We can fix this. We can set up a payment plan. Connor's new business is about to take off. His new business? I pulled out my phone, opened my email, scrolled to the estate statements. Let me read you some of these withdrawals. October 2018, $3,000. That was for Connor's cryptocurrency mining operation that lost everything in 2 months. March 2019, $5,500. That was for his meal prep delivery service that got 3 customers. July 2020, $8,000. We get it, Connor snapped. No, I don't think you do. Because while you were burning through my inheritance on failed business ideas, I was working 50-hour weeks, paying off student loans, skipping meals to save money. I've been sleeping on a mattress on the floor for 3 years because I couldn't afford a bed frame. That's not our fault, Dad said. You chose your career. I chose nursing because someone in this family needed to be responsible. Because I watched you bail Connor out of every bad decision he ever made, and I knew that no one would be there to catch me if I fell. Silence fell over the room like a weight. Mom was crying now. Zoe, you're being cruel. I'm being cruel? My voice dropped to almost a whisper. Mom, I worked Christmas Eve last year. Double shift. I missed Christmas dinner because we were short-staffed and someone had to cover. Do you know where Connor was? No answer. He was here. Opening presents. Eating your ham. Sleeping in until noon in his old bedroom. And when I finally got here at 8 p.m., exhausted, still in my scrubs, do you know what you said to me? Mom's face crumpled. You said, "Oh, Zoe, you're here. Can you help clean up? We've made such a mess." A sob escaped Mom's throat. You never asked how my shift was. You never asked if I'd eaten. You handed me dirty plates and went back to watching Connor play with his new drone. The $800 drone you bought him while I was saving quarters to do laundry. That's not fair, Dad said, but his voice had lost its edge. What's not fair is that Grandma Ellen, the only person in this family who ever saw me, left me something to help me build a future. And you three stole it so Connor could keep playing entrepreneur. Connor finally met my eyes. Zoe, I'm sorry. I really am. But what do you want us to do? The money's gone. I can't just pay it back. I don't have it. Then get it. Sell your car. Sell your camera equipment. Sell every piece of tech you bought with my money and get a real job. I have a job, Connor protested. You have a hobby that our parents subsidize. That's not a job. Dad stepped between us. Zoe, that's enough. We're family. We don't talk to each other like this. No, Dad. You don't get to tell me what family does. Not after this. I turned to leave, then stopped at the door. I'm giving you 1 week. 7 days. Come up with a repayment plan, get it in writing, have everyone sign it. Or I'm going to the police. Mom gasped. You wouldn't. I looked at her. Really looked at her. This woman who'd given birth to me, raised me, and then spent 29 years making me feel invisible while she propped up my brother. Try me. I walked out, got in my car, drove home in complete silence because if I turned on the radio, if I let myself think, I would fall apart. The next morning, I was a zombie at work. I went through the motions, checking vitals, administering medications, charting notes. But my mind was somewhere else. During my lunch break, I found myself in the hospital's legal aid office. We had one on the 3rd floor for staff and patient families. I'd never been inside. The attorney was a woman in her 50s named Caroline Grant. She listened to everything without interrupting. When I finished, she sat back in her chair. Zoe, what your father did is called embezzlement. It's also forgery, fraud, and theft. My stomach dropped. How much trouble is he in? Potentially significant. But that depends on whether you want to press charges. I just want my money back. Understandable. But here's what you need to know. If you pursue this criminally, your father could face jail time. Fines. A felony record. It would destroy him professionally. I thought about Dad. His job as an insurance adjuster. His reputation in our community. And if I don't press charges, then you need to understand something. Caroline leaned forward. People who steal from family members, even when they call it borrowing, rarely pay the money back. Especially when there are no legal consequences. So my only option is to send my father to prison? No. Your option is to decide whether you want justice or family peace. In my experience, you rarely get both. I gave them a week. 7 days to come up with a plan, put it in writing, show me they understood the gravity of what they'd done. Day 1, nothing. Day 2, a text from Mom. Can we please talk about this calmly? I didn't respond. Day 3, Connor called. I let it go to voicemail. Zoe, come on. You're blowing this out of proportion. It's just money. Family is more important than money. Just money. $46,000 was just money to him because he'd never had to work for any of it. Day 4, Dad sent an email. Subject line, family meeting. I deleted it without opening it. Day 5, Mom showed up at the hospital. Security called my floor. There's a Linda Reeves in the lobby asking for you. I went down during my break. She was sitting on one of those uncomfortable plastic chairs, her purse clutched in her lap like a shield. Zoe, please. Her eyes were red. You're tearing this family apart. I didn't tear anything apart, Mom. Dad did that 7 years ago when he started forging documents in my name. He was trying to help your brother. By stealing from me. Do you hear yourself? She stood up, suddenly angry. You've always been jealous of Connor. Ever since you were kids. He got more attention, more support, and you resented him for it. The words hit me like a physical blow. Jealous? Mom, I raised myself. I put myself through school. I worked myself to exhaustion because I learned when I was 10 years old that nobody in this family was going to help me. And you think I'm jealous? You've always been so independent, so cold. I'm independent because you made me that way. Because every time I needed something, you were busy fixing Connor's latest disaster. People in the lobby were staring. I didn't care anymore. I needed help with my science project in 6th grade. You were at Connor's basketball game. I got my first period at school and bled through my pants. You were meeting with Connor's guidance counselor. I got accepted to nursing school with a partial scholarship and needed help with the rest. You said you couldn't afford it, and then 2 weeks later bought Connor a new laptop for his business ideas. Mom's face had gone pale. I learned to be independent because depending on you meant disappointment. Every single time. That's not fair. What's not fair is that Grandma Ellen saw what you refused to see. That I needed someone in my corner. That I deserved to have something that was mine. And you let Dad steal it. I didn't know, Mom whispered. You knew Connor was living rent-free in your basement at 28. You knew he'd never held a job for more than 6 months. You knew Dad was supporting him somehow. You didn't ask questions because you didn't want to know the answers. She started crying. Not the gentle tears of earlier. These were ugly, heaving sobs. I just wanted both my children to be happy. At my expense. Always at my expense. I walked away. Left her crying in the hospital lobby. Went back to my floor, checked on my patients, and felt absolutely nothing. That night was day 6. Day 7. The deadline. My phone buzzed at 3 p.m. A text from Dad. We're all at the house. Please come. We have something for you. I almost didn't go. Almost. But some small part of me, the part that still remembered being 6 years old and believing my parents loved me, needed to see this through. I drove there after my shift. Walked up to the door. Used my key one more time. The living room was full. Not just Mom, Dad, and Connor. Aunt Patricia was there. Uncle Jim. My cousin Rachel. Even Grandpa Walt in his wheelchair, looking confused about why he'd been summoned. An intervention. They'd staged an intervention. For me. The victim. Sit down, Zoe, Dad said, gesturing to the empty chair they'd placed in the center of the room like a throne. Or a defendant's box. I stayed standing. What is this? We wanted everyone here, Mom said. So you can hear from people who love you that you're making a huge mistake. Aunt Patricia spoke first. Zoe, honey, I know you're upset. But family forgives. That's what we do. Uncle Jim nodded. Your father made a bad judgment call. But destroying his life over it? That's not the Zoe we know. Cousin Rachel, who I'd been close with as kids, looked at me with disappointed eyes. Connor told me what happened. I can't believe you'd even consider going to the police. Over money. Over and over. The same message, delivered by different voices. Family forgives. It's just money. You're overreacting. Think of what this will do to your father. Connor needs support, not judgment. You're being vindictive. This isn't who you are. Grandpa Walt was the only one who didn't speak. He just watched me with those sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. Finally, Dad stood up. He was holding papers. We've prepared something for you. A payment plan. He handed me 3 pieces of paper stapled together. I read it standing there while 12 pairs of eyes watched me. Connor will repay the full amount of $46,000 over the next 15 years. Monthly payments of $255. 15 years. $255 a month. No interest. No penalty for missed payments. No legal enforcement mechanism. You can't be serious. It's what we can afford, Connor said. I did the math in my head. $255 a month is $3,060 a year. At that rate, it'll take him 15 years. I'll be 44 years old. It's better than nothing, Dad said. The trust was supposed to help me buy a house. Start a life. Have a future. And you want me to wait 15 years while Connor pays me back pocket change every month. It's what we can do, Mom said softly. I looked down at the paper again. At the bottom, there were signature lines. For Connor. For Dad as a witness. Not for Mom. Not for anyone else. Just Connor's promise to maybe, possibly, pay me back if he felt like it. Where's the collateral? What happens if he misses a payment? Silence. What happens if he decides he can't afford it? More silence. This isn't a repayment plan. This is a donation request with a schedule. Zoe, please. Dad's voice was strained. We're trying. This is the best we can do. I looked around the room. At all these people who'd gathered to tell me I was wrong. That I should accept crumbs and call it resolution. Then I looked at Grandpa Walt. He was staring at me with an expression I couldn't read. What do you think, Grandpa? Everyone turned to look at him. He'd been silent the entire time, just watching. He cleared his throat. Spoke in that gravelly voice that always commanded attention. I think Ellen knew exactly what she was doing when she set up that trust. The room went still. My daughter knew this family. Knew how Richard always favored the boy. Knew how Linda made excuses. Knew how Zoe got the short end of the stick every damn time. Dad, Mom started. I'm not finished. Grandpa Walt's eyes were hard. Ellen protected that money because she knew if it wasn't locked up tight, it'd end up exactly where it ended up. In Connor's pocket. Connor's face flushed red. And now you've all gathered here to pressure Zoe into accepting pennies on the dollar for what's rightfully hers? To make her feel guilty for being angry that her own father stole from her. It wasn't stealing, Dad said weakly. The hell it wasn't. You forged documents, boy. That's fraud. That's criminal. Grandpa Walt turned his wheelchair to face me directly. Zoe, your grandmother loved you fiercely. She saw herself in you. Strong, independent, unappreciated. She left you that money so you'd have choices. So you'd have freedom. So you wouldn't have to depend on people who never learned how to show up for you. Tears burned my eyes. Don't you dare let them take that from her. Don't you dare let them make you small again. I looked at the paper in my hands. At the pathetic payment plan that would keep me tied to my brother's broken promises for 15 years. Then I tore it in half. Zoe, Mom gasped. No, I'm not accepting this. Then what do you want? Dad's voice was rising. You want me to go to jail? You want to destroy this family. I want you to understand that what you did was wrong. Actually wrong. Not whoops, my bad wrong. Criminal wrong. We've apologized. You haven't. Not once. Not really. You've made excuses, justified your actions, and tried to make me feel guilty for being angry. I turned to face the whole room. Every single one of you came here tonight to tell me I'm wrong. To tell me I should forgive and forget and accept whatever scraps Connor feels like throwing my way. Not one of you asked how I'm doing. Not one of you acknowledged that what happened to me was traumatic. Not one of you stood up and said, Zoe, you're right. This was theft. You deserve better. Cousin Rachel looked away. Aunt Patricia studied her hands. Grandpa Walt was right. Grandma Ellen knew. She knew I'd need protection from my own family. And she was right. I walked to the door, then turned back. You have 24 hours to give me a real solution. Full repayment plan with collateral. Legal documentation. Consequences for non-payment. Or I'm filing a police report tomorrow night. You wouldn't, Mom whispered. Watch me. They didn't call. 24 hours came and went. No calls. No texts. No revised payment plans. Just silence. So I kept my promise. The police station was smaller than I expected. Fluorescent lights, linoleum floors, the smell of burnt coffee and stress. I told the detective everything. Showed him the bank statements, the forged medical documents, the email trail. He listened, took notes, asked clarifying questions. Miss Reeves, you understand that if we pursue this, your father will be arrested. He'll be charged with fraud, forgery, and embezzlement. These are serious felonies. I understand. And you're sure you want to proceed? I thought about Grandma Ellen. About the hours she'd worked as a seamstress, the money she'd saved carefully, the trust she'd set up to protect me. I'm sure. He nodded slowly. We'll open an investigation. It'll take a few weeks to gather all the evidence, interview witnesses. We'll be in touch. I walked out of that police station feeling lighter and heavier at the same time. That night, I called my parents. Dad answered. I filed the report. Silence. Then, how could you? How could you steal from me for 7 years? We're your parents. That should have meant something. I hung up. 3 weeks passed in a strange fog. I went to work, came home, slept, repeated. My phone stayed silent. No calls from Mom. No texts from Connor. No emails from Dad. The silence should have been peaceful. Instead, it felt like standing in the eye of a hurricane, knowing the other side was coming. Detective Morrison called on a Thursday afternoon. I was restocking supplies in the medication room when my phone buzzed. Miss Reeves, we've completed our investigation. The evidence is substantial. The DA wants to move forward with charges. My hand froze on a box of syringes. What charges? Forgery, fraud, and embezzlement. Your father is looking at 3 felony counts. We're executing the arrest warrant tomorrow morning. Tomorrow. My father would be arrested tomorrow. Miss Reeves? Are you still there? Yes. I'm here. You'll need to come in to give a formal statement. And eventually, you'll be called to testify. Testify. The word felt foreign in my mouth. At the trial. If it goes to trial. Most cases like this end in plea deals, but we need you prepared either way. After we hung up, I sat on the floor of the medication room for 10 minutes, surrounded by boxes of gauze and antibiotic ointments, trying to remember how to breathe. The next day, I was in the middle of taking vitals on a post-op patient when my phone lit up with a call from Mom. I stepped into the hallway. Zoe. Her voice was destroyed. Raw. They arrested your father. At his office. In front of his colleagues. How could you do this to him? I didn't do anything. He did this to himself. You filed that report. You sent the police after him. He committed crimes, Mom. Multiple felonies. What did you expect would happen? I expected my daughter to have a heart. To remember that he's your father. Something in me snapped. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just a quiet, clean break. And I expected my father not to steal from me. I guess we're both disappointed. I hung up. That afternoon, Connor finally broke his silence with a text. I hope you're happy. Dad's bail is $15,000. Mom's using her retirement savings. This is on you. I stared at that message for a long time. Then I blocked his number. A week before the preliminary hearing, something unexpected happened at work. I was called to the hospital administrator's office. Joyce Chin had been the administrator for 8 years, a small woman with sharp eyes and a reputation for fairness. I'd never spoken to her directly. Miss Reeves, please sit. My heart hammered. Had someone complained? Was I in trouble? She folded her hands on her desk. I've become aware of a situation involving your family. Specifically, your father's recent arrest. My face went hot. Ah, yes. That's a personal matter. I'm not here to judge you, Zoe. I'm here because something came across my desk that you need to know about. She pulled out a file folder, slid it across the desk to me. What is this? Open it. Inside were financial documents, hospital billing records, payment receipts, all in my name. I don't understand. Joyce leaned back in her chair. 5 years ago, you were treated in our ER for a severe allergic reaction. Do you remember? I nodded. I'd eaten something with tree nuts, gone into anaphylactic shock, been rushed here by ambulance. It was terrifying. Your bill was $4,200 after insurance. According to our records, it was paid in full by Richard Reeves using funds from the Ellen May Reeves Memorial Trust. That was legitimate then. That actually happened. Yes. But look at the next page. I flipped to the next document. Another hospital bill. Same date. Same admission. But this one was for $12,800. I don't understand. Why are there 2 bills? The first one is real. The second one is fraudulent. Someone, likely your father, created a fake hospital bill, inflating the charges, and used it to justify withdrawing $12,800 from your trust. He paid us $4,200. Kept the other $8,600. The room tilted. He didn't just steal from you, Zoe. He used one real medical emergency to justify multiple fake ones. We found 3 other instances like this in our records. Real treatments, inflated bills, the difference pocketed. How did you find this? When your father was arrested, it flagged in our system. We routinely investigate any financial crimes that involve our billing department. I wanted you to know before the hearing. She pulled out another document. This is a letter for your attorney. Official hospital documentation of the fraud. It'll strengthen your case considerably. I stared at her. Why are you helping me? Joyce's expression softened. Because I've worked in hospitals for 30 years. I've seen medical debt destroy families. I've seen people ration insulin, skip treatments, delay care because they can't afford it. What your father did, using fake medical bills to steal from you, it's not just theft. It's a violation of something sacred. She stood up, walked around the desk, sat in the chair next to mine. And because I have a daughter your age, if someone did this to her, I'd want someone to stand up and say it's wrong. So I'm saying it. What happened to you is wrong. You deserve justice. I walked out of that office with the file folder clutched to my chest and cried in my car for 20 minutes. Someone believed me. Someone saw it. Someone stood up. The courthouse was all marble and echoes. I wore my navy suit, the one I'd bought for job interviews, and sensible flats. Armor. My attorney, Marcus Winters, met me at the security checkpoint. He was a prosecutor assigned to the case, mid-40s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. How are you holding up? I'm here. That's all we need. Remember, today is just a preliminary hearing. The judge determines if there's enough evidence to proceed to trial. You might have to testify. Will my family be here? His expression told me everything before he spoke. Yes. We walked through the metal detector, rode the elevator to the 3rd floor, entered Courtroom 6. They were already there. Mom, Connor, Aunt Patricia, Uncle Jim. Sitting in the benches behind the defense table like a wall of solidarity. For my father, the criminal, not one of them looked at me. I took my seat on the prosecution side. Alone. Dad was brought in moments later. He was wearing a suit I'd seen him wear to church. His hands were folded in front of him, no handcuffs, but his shoulders were hunched. He looked smaller than I remembered. He didn't look at me either. All rise. The Honorable Rachel Martinez presiding. The judge entered. A Latina woman in her 60s with silver-streaked black hair and an expression that suggested she'd heard every excuse in the book. The prosecutor presented the evidence. Bank statements. Forged medical bills. The hospital's documentation of fraud. Text messages where Dad asked Connor about which business opportunity to invest in next. It was damning. Clinical. Undeniable. Then the defense attorney stood up. A polished man in an expensive suit. Your Honor, we don't dispute that funds were withdrawn from the trust. What we dispute is the characterization of these withdrawals as theft. Richard Reeves is the co-trustee of this account, legally authorized to make withdrawals. He used this money to help his son, Zoe's brother, during times of financial hardship. This is a family matter, not a criminal one. Except for the forged medical documents, Judge Martinez said dryly. My client acknowledges errors in judgment regarding the documentation. But Your Honor, intent matters. Richard Reeves never intended to steal from his daughter. He intended to help his son with the full belief that the money would be repaid. The judge looked unimpressed. Believing you'll repay stolen money doesn't make it not stolen. We'd like to call a character witness, Your Honor. Proceed. Mom stood up, walked to the witness stand, placed her hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth. She looked directly at me as she testified. My husband is a good man. He's been a good father, a good provider. He made a mistake, yes, but it was out of love for his son. Connor was struggling, and what parent doesn't help their struggling child? My attorney didn't object. This wasn't a trial, just a hearing. Zoe has always been independent, strong. She didn't need the money the way Connor did. Richard knew she'd be fine. And she is fine. She has a good job, a stable life. Mrs. Reeves, Judge Martinez interrupted. Did your husband tell you he was withdrawing money from your daughter's trust? Mom blinked. Well, no, but... Did you know he was creating fraudulent medical bills? No, but I'm sure he didn't mean. Thank you, Mrs. Reeves. You may step down. Mom walked back to her seat, looking shaken. Then the judge turned to me. Miss Reeves, please take the stand. I walked to the witness, stand on legs that felt like water. Placed my hand on the Bible. Swore to tell the truth. Judge Martinez looked at me over her reading glasses. Not unkindly, but not gently either. Just curious. Miss Reeves, I've reviewed the evidence. I've read the statements. I've seen the documentation. But I want to hear from you directly. Why did you file this police report? I took a breath. Because my grandmother trusted my father to protect something she'd saved for me. And he violated that trust. Many families have financial disputes. They don't typically result in criminal charges. Why did you choose this path? This was it. The moment that would define everything. Because I spent my whole life being the easy daughter. The one who didn't need anything. The one who handled things on her own. And I learned something from that, Your Honor. I learned that when you never ask for help, people assume you don't need it. They take and take and take because you never stop them. You never draw a line. My voice was steady now. Stronger. My father took $46,000 over 7 years. He forged documents. He lied to estate managers. He inflated real medical bills to hide fake ones. And when I found out, when I confronted him, he didn't apologize. He made excuses. He offered me a payment plan that would take 15 years and had no legal enforcement. I looked at Mom, at Connor, at Dad with his head bowed. I filed that police report because my grandmother worked her whole life as a seamstress to save that money. She died believing it would help me build a future. And I owed it to her, and to myself, to draw a line and say, no more. You don't get to steal from me and call it family. Judge Martinez was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked the question that changed everything. Miss Reeves, at any point during these 7 years, did your father ever tell you he was withdrawing money from your trust? No, Your Honor. Did he ever tell you he was struggling financially or that Connor needed help? No, Your Honor. Did he ever ask your permission to use your inheritance to fund your brother's business ventures? No, Your Honor. So you're telling me that your father, as co-trustee of an account meant to benefit you, secretly withdrew nearly $50,000, forged medical documents to justify those withdrawals, gave that money to your brother, and never once informed you of any of this? Yes, Your Honor. I didn't know any of it until I received the annual statement 3 weeks ago. The judge turned to look at my father, at my mother, at the defense attorney who suddenly looked less confident. Mr. Reeves, please stand. Dad stood. Slowly. Judge Martinez removed her glasses. Mr. Reeves, I want you to explain something to me. Help me understand. Your daughter, your younger daughter, the one sitting right there, trusted you. As her father, as her co-trustee, as someone who should have had her best interests at heart. She paused. And instead of protecting her inheritance, instead of safeguarding the money her grandmother left her, you stole it. You forged documents. You lied. You gave it all to your son. And when she discovered what you'd done, you didn't take responsibility. You didn't offer real restitution. You gathered your family to pressure her into accepting pennies on the dollar. Dad's shoulders were shaking. So here's my question for you, Mr. Reeves. And I want you to think very carefully before you answer. The courtroom was silent. At any point in these 7 years, did you ever stop to consider what you were taking from your daughter? Not just money, but her future, her security, her grandmother's final gift, her ability to trust her own family. Did you ever stop and think about Zoe at all? Dad stood there, hands trembling at his sides, staring at a spot on the floor somewhere between him and the judge's bench. 5 seconds passed. 10. 15. The silence was crushing. Mr. Reeves, Judge Martinez repeated, her voice quieter now but somehow more powerful. Did you ever stop to consider what you were taking from your daughter? Dad's mouth opened, closed. He looked at his attorney, who gave him a tiny nod. Permission to speak. Aye. His voice cracked. I thought Connor needed it more. The judge leaned forward. That's not what I asked. Zoe was always fine on her own. She always figured things out. Connor needed help. He needed someone to believe in him. Mr. Reeves. The judge's voice cut through his rambling like a blade. The question was, did you think about Zoe? About what she needed? About what you were taking from her? More silence. Then barely audible. No. The word fell into the courtroom like a stone into still water. No, Your Honor. I didn't think about that. Mom made a sound. A small, broken gasp. Judge Martinez sat back in her chair. You didn't think about it. I just wanted to help Connor. At your daughter's expense. Without her knowledge. Without her consent. Dad finally looked up. Looked at me for the first time since entering the courtroom. His eyes were red, his face crumbling. Zoe, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I felt nothing. No anger. No satisfaction. Just a vast, empty space where my family used to be. Judge Martinez addressed the courtroom. I've been a judge for 19 years. I've seen a lot of cases. Fraud, embezzlement, theft. But cases involving family theft are particularly painful because they don't just steal money. They steal something far more valuable, trust. She looked at my mother. At Connor. At the relatives sitting in solidarity with the man who'd committed crimes. Mrs. Reeves, you testified that your husband is a good man who made a mistake. But good men don't forge documents. Good men don't steal from their children. Good men don't spend 7 years lying to cover their tracks. What your husband did wasn't a mistake. It was a pattern of deliberate, calculated fraud. Mom's face was white. And you, the family members sitting here in support of Mr. Reeves, you should be asking yourselves why you're here. You're not here because justice is being perverted. You're here because you can't face the truth that someone you love committed real crimes against someone else you claim to love. Judge Martinez turned to me. Miss Reeves, I want you to hear something from this bench, officially. You did nothing wrong. Not by discovering the theft. Not by reporting it. Not by refusing to accept inadequate restitution. You exercised your legal rights as a victim of a crime. That's not vindictive. That's not cruel. That's justice. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I wouldn't let them fall. Not here. Not now. The judge put her glasses back on and looked down at her documents. Based on the evidence presented, I find sufficient probable cause to bind Mr. Richard Reeves over for trial on 3 counts: forgery in the first degree, fraud, and embezzlement. Bail will remain at $15,000. Trial date to be set within 60 days. The gavel came down. Court is adjourned. Everyone stood as the judge left. I gathered my things, my purse, my folder of documents, my car keys. Marcus touched my elbow gently. That went as well as it could have. The judge's statement was extraordinary. She clearly believes you. What happens now? The DA will likely offer your father a plea deal. First offense, his age, his lack of criminal history. They'll probably offer probation, restitution, and a felony on his record. If he takes it, you won't have to testify at trial. And if he doesn't, then we go to trial. And you tell your story to a jury. I nodded numbly. As I turned to leave, I had to walk past my family. There was no other exit. Mom was crying into Aunt Patricia's shoulder. Connor stood with his arms crossed, staring at me with cold eyes. Uncle Jim looked away. But Grandpa Walt was there too. I hadn't seen him in the courtroom. He must have come in late. He wheeled himself directly into my path. Zoe. I stopped. He reached out and took my hand. His grip was surprisingly strong. Your grandmother would be proud of you. That's when the tears finally came. I miss her, Grandpa. I know, sweetheart. I know. He squeezed my hand tighter. She told me before she died that she worried about you. Not because you weren't strong, you're the strongest person I know, but because you were so used to handling everything alone that you'd forgotten you were allowed to ask for help. Allowed to demand what's yours. He glanced back at my father, being led out by his attorney. Ellen set up that trust to give you choices. Freedom. Independence on your terms, not theirs. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty for protecting that. They all hate me now. They're angry because you refused to keep their secrets. Because you held up a mirror and made them see what they'd become. He released my hand. Let them be angry. You be free. I bent down and hugged him. He smelled like old books and peppermint, exactly like he had when I was 6 years old. When I straightened up, Connor was suddenly there. I hope you're satisfied. His voice was low, venomous. You destroyed Dad. You destroyed this family. For what? Money. I looked at my brother. Really looked at him. No, Connor. Not for money. For dignity. For the principle that family doesn't mean one person gets to be sacrificed so everyone else can be comfortable. You always thought you were better than me. No. I thought I was equal to you. Turns out I was wrong. I've always been worth less to this family. The only difference is now I'm not pretending otherwise. I walked past him. Past Aunt Patricia's disapproving glare. Past Uncle Jim's awkward silence. I walked out of that courthouse alone. And for the first time in my life, alone felt like freedom. Dad took the plea deal. 3 years probation. 300 hours of community service. Full restitution of $46,000 plus interest, totaling $52,780. Monthly payments of $750 until paid in full. A felony conviction on his record. He lost his job. The insurance company didn't want someone convicted of fraud handling claims. He found work as a bookkeeper at a small firm that didn't run thorough background checks. The pay was half what he used to make. Mom divorced him 6 months after the sentencing. I heard about it through Grandpa Walt. She'd apparently told Dad that she couldn't forgive him, not for the theft but for the lies. For making her complicit without her knowledge. For the humiliation of standing in that courtroom and realizing she'd defended a crime. Connor moved back into Dad's apartment. The two of them, together in a small 2-bedroom, trying to survive on shoestring budgets for the first time in their lives. I felt no satisfaction in any of it. Just a dull, distant sadness for people who used to be my family. The restitution payments came like clockwork. $750 every month on the first. Dad never missed one. I think the probation officer scared him more than I ever could. I put every payment into a high-yield savings account. Didn't touch it. Didn't spend it. Just watched the number grow. By month 8, I had $6,000 plus interest. It would take years to reach the full amount, but I had time. My credit score had recovered too. Back up to 720. High enough for a mortgage. I found an apartment. Small, one bedroom, but it had a balcony. A real balcony, not a fire escape someone stuck a plan on. I could stand out there in the morning with my coffee and watch the sunrise over the city. I closed on it in October. Signed the papers alone. Got the keys alone. Unlocked the door alone. And it felt perfect. 3 weeks after I moved into my new place, Mom sent me a text. It was the first time she'd contacted me since the preliminary hearing. "Zoe, can we talk? Just you and me." I stared at that message for an hour. Drafted 5 different responses. Deleted them all. Finally, when? "Tomorrow. Coffee. That place on 5th Street you used to like." The next day, I walked into the coffee shop expecting, I don't know, a fight. More accusations. More tears. Mom was already there, sitting at a corner table, looking smaller than I remembered. Older. There were new lines around her eyes, new gray in her hair. I sat down across from her. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. "I almost didn't. I wouldn't have blamed you." Silence. Not comfortable. Not hostile. Just empty. Mom wrapped her hands around her coffee cup like she needed the warmth. "I filed for divorce. I heard. I should have done it sooner. I should have. I should have done a lot of things sooner." She looked up at me, and I saw something I hadn't seen in the courtroom. Genuine remorse. Not for being caught. Not for the consequences. But for the hurt itself. "Zoe, I need to say something, and I need you to let me finish." I nodded. "I failed you. Not just with the money. I failed you your whole life. I saw it happening, the way Richard and I poured everything into Connor, the way we expected you to be fine on your own, the way we took your strength for granted. I saw it, and I told myself it was okay because you were okay." Her voice broke. "But you weren't okay. You were just good at surviving. And I should have seen the difference." Tears started sliding down her cheeks. Real ones. The ugly kind. When that judge asked Richard if he'd thought about you at all, and he said no, something in me shattered. Because I realized I hadn't really thought about you either. Not about what you needed. Not about what it cost you to always be the easy one. She pulled a tissue from her purse, wiped her eyes. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even know if I deserve the chance to earn it back. But I needed you to know that I see it now. I see you now. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I sat there, my own coffee growing cold between my hands, and felt something crack open in my chest. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But maybe the beginning of it. "Mom, I spent my whole life trying to earn your attention. Trying to be good enough, responsible enough, easy enough that you'd notice me the way you noticed Connor. And it was never enough. Because it wasn't about me. It was about you and Dad deciding who needed what, without ever asking." She nodded, still crying. "I need you to understand something. I didn't file that police report to punish Dad. I filed it because it was the only way to make anyone take it seriously. The only way to make anyone acknowledge that what happened was wrong. I know. The judge was right. You did nothing wrong." We sat there for another 20 minutes. Talking. Really talking. Not fixing anything. It was too soon for that, maybe too late for that. But beginning. As I got up to leave, Mom reached across the table and touched my hand. "I know I don't have the right to ask, but would you be willing to try? To rebuild something? Not the family we were, but something new." I thought about Grandma Ellen. About boundaries. About the difference between forgiveness and accepting continued harm. "I'm willing to try. But it has to be different, Mom. I can't go back to being invisible while everyone else's needs come first." "I understand. Different. I promise. And I need you to understand something else. I'm not having a relationship with Dad. Not now. Maybe not ever. And Connor. Connor blamed me for consequences he helped create. Until he can acknowledge that, I can't have him in my life either." Mom's face fell, but she nodded. "That's fair. That's more than fair." That was 8 months ago. Mom and I meet for coffee now. Once a month. Sometimes twice. We're rebuilding something. It's fragile. It's small. But it's honest in a way our relationship never was before. Dad and I haven't spoken. He sends the restitution payments. I deposit them. That's the extent of our relationship. Maybe one day that will change. Maybe it won't. I'm okay with either outcome. Connor sent me an email last month. Subject line, "I'm sorry. I haven't opened it. I might someday. Or I might delete it. I haven't decided yet. Grandpa Walt comes to my apartment for dinner every Sunday. We cook together, his mother's recipes, stories from when Grandma Ellen was alive, comfortable silence when the stories run out. He's the only family I have who never asked me to be smaller than I am. Work is good. I got promoted to charge nurse. The pay bump helped with the mortgage. My apartment is slowly filling with furniture I chose, art I love, a life that's entirely mine. And here's what I've learned. Family isn't about blood. It's not about obligation. It's not about who you share DNA with, or who raised you, or who you spent holidays with as a child. Family is about who sees you, who protects you, who celebrates you without needing you to shrink, who stands beside you when it would be easier to walk away. By that definition, I lost most of my family. But I found something more valuable, myself. I spent 29 years being the easy daughter, the invisible one, the one who didn't need anything because asking felt dangerous. I'm not that person anymore. Now I know my worth. I know my boundaries. I know the difference between love and tolerance. I know that protecting yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. If you're watching this and you've ever been the easy one, the responsible one, the one everyone takes for granted because you never complain, I want you to hear this. You are allowed to need things. You are allowed to demand respect. You are allowed to walk away from people who only value you for what you provide. Even if they're family. Especially if they're family. My mother called me vindictive for protecting myself. My brother called me cruel for expecting accountability. My father called it a betrayal that I refused to silently absorb the consequences of his crimes. They were wrong. Setting boundaries isn't vindictive. Expecting honesty isn't cruel. Refusing to be victimized isn't betrayal. It's survival. It's dignity. It's self-respect. And if your family can't survive you having those things, then what you had wasn't a family. It was a system, and you were the one holding it together at your own expense. You were allowed to stop. So here's my question for you, the one I want you to really think about. Have you ever been the person everyone expected to just handle it? The one who had to be strong so everyone else could fall apart? Have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and keeping yourself? Drop your answer in the comments. A, if you've been there. B, if you're there right now. And C, if you got out. I want to hear your story. Because you're not alone. None of us are. And if this resonated with you, if any part of it made you feel seen, hit that subscribe button. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Remember, you are not responsible for other people's feelings about your boundaries. You are not obligated to set yourself on fire to keep other people warm. You are not required to sacrifice your future for someone else's comfort. You are allowed to choose yourself. Take care. You deserve it.